In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on January 6th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Colorado Avalanche versus Tampa Bay Lightning. Colorado walks into Tampa looking like the league's final boss, sitting on 69 points from 41 games with that wild plus 72 goal differential, while the Lightning have quietly stacked up 53 points and a plus 32, which is a nice way of saying they are very good but still chasing the current standard. Odds makers have nudged Colorado into that small road favorite pocket on the money line, and honestly, when you zoom out and look at the season as a whole, that makes sense, because one team is operating like a cheat code over 40-plus games, not just over a hot week. What really pushes this matchup toward the visitors from a side perspective is the gap in how sustainable their profiles look over time. Colorado is scoring around 4 goals a night and allowing a bit over 2, so their script is simple. They generate pressure in long, grinding shifts, they own the neutral zone, and they rarely need their goalie to stand on his head just to survive. Tampa, by contrast, is a touch more boom and flash, still very dangerous, still skilled as ever, but their success leans a bit more on elite finishing and on special teams, which is fun to watch but a little more volatile when you zoom out over months instead of nights. Then you layer in the context of how each team is arriving here. Colorado just had that 10-game heater snapped in a tight 2-1 loss in Florida, and that game doubled as a gut punch because their captain was hurt in the process. Even with that, their larger pattern has been absurd consistency, long winning streaks, very few off nights, and a style that carries from building to building, which matters a lot when you are trying to project a single road game like this and not just talk yourself into Tampa at home feels scary. Tampa's recent surge has been fueled by that perfect road swing and some huge offensive nights, including that defenseman hat trick on the West Coast, but underneath the headlines they are still giving up a fair number of quality looks and leaning on goaltending and shot-making to smooth things over. That is a big difference from Colorado, who spend more of the game in control of pace and location, not just the scoreboard, so when the puck bounces strangely or a whistle goes against them, their structure still tends to drag games back to their preferred script. Injuries tilt the board too, and not in a subtle way. Colorado is missing important pieces, with key skaters either out or banged up, but they have been living in that reality all season and still posting the best record in the league, partly because they roll out wave after wave of competent depth that can keep the machine running. Tampa's blue line, on the other hand, is missing serious nameplate weight, with their captain sidelined along with other regulars, which forces newer faces and depth defenders into tough minutes against a top line that already shreds healthy teams. Over 60 minutes, that usually shows up not just as one obvious mistake, but as a slow drip of small wins for the road team. Cleaner breakouts here, better gap control there, and more time spent defending tired instead of attacking fresh. In net, both sides bring serious talent, but Colorado's tandem has been right at the top of the league in the numbers that matter, which only reinforces what the 5 against 5 play already tells you. You do not need them to steal the game, you only need them to be themselves behind a group that already drives the run of play. Tampa's starter is still a star and still completely capable of playing spoiler, but across this whole season he has had to erase more breakdowns than the Colorado goalies have, and asking him to do that again against the most efficient attack in the league is a big ask, even in front of a loud home crowd. When you put all of that together, it feels less like a coin flip and more like one of those spots where the market is still giving a little extra respect to home ice and brand name history, even though the current versions of these teams point in a clearer direction. As our first pick for this matchup, the Colorado Avalanche money line is our full game side pick. The total line is sitting at 6.5, with the under getting the heavier price, and some spots even teasing a flat 6, which is the market's way of saying, yes, we know these offenses are terrifying, but the way they are winning right now is not just a fire wagon race to 7 goals every night. On paper, you see the league's most explosive attack on one side and a top-tier offense on the other, and your brain immediately pictures a replay reel of end-to-end rushes and 9 total goals. But the current versions of these teams, in this specific season, have a lot more grown up in their games. Colorado is perfectly comfortable in a 2-1 or 3-2 script, as we saw in that loss in Florida, and Tampa's recent streak has just as much to do with cleaning up their own end as it does with pumping in highlight goals. The defensive numbers back that up without turning this into a spreadsheet recital. Colorado is allowing a little over 2 per game, best in the league, and Tampa sits near the very top as well, right around 2.5 to 3 against. That does not happen by accident. It comes from both coaches tightening up gap control, trusting their goalies enough to challenge shooters at the blue line, and shortening the bench when they have a lead. Those are all small, boring choices that quietly crush totals over time, even when the names on the jerseys scream offense. The special teams piece quietly leans toward a lower scoring game too. Both penalty kills are living in that mid-80% neighborhood, which means your typical bad change, minor penalty, instant power play goal sequence is less automatic than it might have been in earlier versions of these clubs. And in a marquee matchup like this, whistles often cool off a bit once the game settles, which naturally drags you away from a parade of power play chances and toward long stretches of 5-on-5 where both teams are playing chess instead of track and field. There is also the emotional and physical context. Colorado is coming off a heavy, playoff-style road back-to-back that already ended one big winning streak, and Tampa just finished a demanding swing of their own. Games like this can look fun on the schedule, but for the players, they often feel like a mid-season measuring stick, and coaches tend to treat them that way. That usually means risk gets dialed back just a notch, especially early, because nobody wants to be the first team to blink and give up an odd man rush that flips the crowd and the momentum before everyone has even broken a sweat. Picture the third period if this game is tied, or if either side is up by a single goal. You are much more likely to see top defensive pairs getting stretch shifts, conservative pinches from the blue line, and forwards chipping pucks out instead of forcing cute plays at their own blue, because both benches will be thinking about standings and seating, not just entertainment value. That kind of closing script is the friend of an under, even in a matchup with elite finishing talent on both sides. So while the highlight reels from past years might tempt you to expect pure chaos, the way these teams are actually wired this season points more toward a smarter, sharper, tighter game where quality wins out over quantity and one mistake can swing everything. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Dallas Stars versus Carolina Hurricanes. So this matchup has a fun little split personality to it, right from the first face-off. Dallas looks like a wagon when you zoom out at the full season, sitting at 25-9-8 with one of the nastiest power plays in the league and scoring a shade north of 3.5 a night. Yet if you only watch the last couple of weeks, you would swear this team is hanging on with white knuckles. They keep coughing up leads. They just lost a 5th straight in overtime to Montreal, and every night feels like the same movie, a flashy top end that can score in bunches and a group that gets just loose enough in its own end at the wrong time. Here is the thing, this version of Dallas is built to blow games open when the power play is cooking, not grind out low event, trench hockey for 60 minutes, and the injuries have pushed them even further away from that comfort zone. Tyler Seguin sitting on long-term injured reserve with the ACL, Leon Bichsel stuck on the shelf on defense, and now Jamie Benn getting his face stitched up and likely missing a couple of games. That is a lot of emotional weight and secondary offense taken out of the room all at once. You still have Mikko Rantanen stirring the drink and that top unit that can turn a bad penalty into a goal before you can grab your drink, but the safety net underneath them is thinner, and you can feel it late in games when leads wobble instead of hardening. On the other side, Carolina is doing that very Hurricanes thing again, playing hockey that looks better under the hood than it sometimes feels in real time. They are tracking as a top-tier shot share team. They have taken points in the large majority of their games, and yet they have had this maddening run of special team swings and one ugly period here or there that turns a solid night into a highlight reel for the other team. The talent has been reshuffled, with Taylor Hall, Nikolai Ehlers, and Logan Stankoven giving the forward group a different flavor, more creativity on the wings, but their core personality is still the same. For check and layers, live in the offensive zone, and make you hate breaking the puck out of your own end. What really matters for this specific spot is how they just responded to getting punched in the mouth a few times. They got run out of their own building by Colorado, they blew a wild one to Montreal, and then went into New Jersey and played a classic enough is enough road game, strangling the Devils 5-on-5 and letting Brandon Bussi put that previous rough outing behind him with 28 saves and a perfect penalty kill in front of him. That kind of game tells you about where their heads are more than any spreadsheet. Lots of blocked shots, sticks in lanes, simple plays off the glass when it was time to live to fight the next shift. Now drop that mindset into a home rink where they have been banking points at a strong clip, even through the injuries, and you get a team that feels much more stable than the raw headlines about Seth Jarvis and Jacob Slavin being week to week would suggest. Jarvis being out hurts the scoring punch, Slavin being out hurts the calm on the back end, but the bench still rolls out veteran pieces and young legs that fit the same system, and Rod Brindamore has had years of practice turning whoever is healthy into the same relentless structure. You can already picture the rhythm, Carolina leaning on that forecheck, the crowd roaring every time a Dallas breakout dies along the wall, and the Stars having to work a lot harder for clean entries than they have against some of their recent opponents. And then there is the human stuff we all quietly factor in even if we pretend we are only talking about numbers. Dallas is out on the road after that frustrating homestand that ended with the overtime loss to Montreal. They are carrying the weight of a losing streak, their captain is hurting, and their goalie room has this weird split vibe, with Casey DeSmith quietly putting up mid 2.4s and solid save numbers while Jake Oettinger wrestles with form and confidence. Across from them is a Hurricanes group that just found a little emotional oxygen again in Newark, coming home with a "we fixed something" feeling and a crowd that knows this is a big chance to send a bit of a message against a Western contender that looks more vulnerable than the record on the standings page suggests. Put it all together and the picture that forms is not some massive talent gap, it is a situational and stylistic squeeze, with Carolina's structure, current mood, and home crowd combining against a Dallas team that looks just a bit frayed around the edges right now, especially in late-game situations when you need fresh legs and clean details to survive the push. The line is going to respect the Stars' long-term numbers and name value, but when you look at how these two teams are actually trending into this specific night, the side that feels more trustworthy to cover its number over 60 minutes is pretty clear. As our first pick for this matchup, the Carolina Hurricanes money line is our full game side pick. On paper, if you only glance at season-long scoring, you could be forgiven for thinking this is one of those grab a snack, the goals are coming kind of games. Dallas is sitting right around that 3.4 goals per game mark. Their power play percentage is living in the high 20s, and the public brain gets trained to see that crest and immediately think goals, goals, goals. But hockey does not always honor the season averages, especially when context shifts as hard as it has for both of these teams lately. Dallas has turned into a weird high event but not high finish group during this losing streak, still generating looks, still flashing the skill, but running into posts, hot goalies, and their own execution problems, especially 5-on-5 when the power play is not bailing them out. You can see it in the way games have ended, not in the highlight packages, tired legs late in periods, pucks dying on sticks at the back door, and just that half second of hesitation that turns an odd man rush into a missed chance instead of a celebration. Carolina, on the other hand, has become a little bit of a Rorschach test for totals lately. They gave us that wild 7-5 loss to Montreal, then a 5-3 track meet with Colorado where the whole third period felt like chaos, and then followed it with that tidy 3-1 clampdown in New Jersey where the game never really felt like it was going to explode on the scoreboard. That kind of swing is exactly why it is easy to get tricked into thinking they are turning into a pure overs team, when what is really happening is a group with a strong defensive template getting burned by a few bad special teams nights and some rough goaltending patches, not a total identity change. If you zoom in a little more carefully, the signs point to a game that can tighten up rather than turn into a track meet. Carolina's penalty kill, when it is dialed in, is suffocating, and we just saw it go 5 for 5 against a Devils team that has plenty of weapons. That is not a fluke, that is the muscle memory of a system that has been together for years kicking back in. Their goals against per game is sitting a bit over 3 right now in part because of those blow-ups, but the underlying idea is still there. Keep shots to the outside, kill plays on the walls, and let the goalie see pucks through bodies that are actually boxing out, not waving sticks. With Bussi bouncing back in such a big way in Newark and Frederik Andersen lurking as a veteran option, you can feel the goaltending situation stabilizing emotionally, even while the injury to Pyotr Kochetkov hangs over the season. On the Stars side of the total, there is also the very real chance that the coaching message shifts away from let the talent play and toward let us stop gifting rush chances after the recent run. Glenn Gulutzan knows very well what an aggressive power play and star talent can do. But he also knows what constant trading of chances does to a team that is tired, beat up, and missing some of its usual finishers like Seguin and, at least for now, Ben. When you are on a road swing, your captain is banged up, your streak is ugly, and your backup goalie has actually been your statistical rock, the conversation in the room starts to sound less like "let us go win 7-5" and more like "let us play something we can live with." There is also the quiet drag of Carolina's injuries on the tempo of this game that matters for the number, even if it is not as flashy as a highlight reel goal. No Seth Jarvis means their leading goal scorer is in the press box, which naturally trims some of their finishing from the lineup and pushes more responsibility onto Hall, Ehlers, and Stankoven to create without overextending themselves. No Jacob Slavin means the puck might come out a touch slower on some breakouts, and without Charles Alexis Legault and Kochetkov available, there is even more incentive for the Canes to keep this within their structure, not let it turn into a pond hockey festival where depth gets exposed in transition. So when you put all of that together, the raw season scoring rates, the current form of the goaltenders, the sting in Carolina's penalty kill when it is feeling itself, the injuries that strip away some of the easy finishing talent on both sides, and the psychological weight of Dallas trying to finally stop this skid, the total starts to look inflated by reputation more than by what these rosters and game states are actually screaming right now. This sets up much more like a game where both teams try to manage risk, lean on special teams discipline, and see if quality goaltending and structure can finally give them a clean, breathable win instead of another high-scoring roller coaster that leaves everyone gasping at the horn. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Florida Panthers versus Toronto Maple Leafs. This matchup in Toronto feels less like a random January game and more like a status check on two very different hockey realities. You have the back-to-back Cup champs coming in at a 22-16-3 record, still trying to remember what normal actually is after parades, an outdoor spectacle in Miami, and an injury list that has looked like a novel instead of a chart. Their season has already turned into a stress test, with their captain and another star forward still waiting to play a single regular season shift after major surgeries. Yet they are hanging around a .57 3-point percentage and sitting almost dead even on goal differential, which is quietly impressive for a group that should be exhausted by now. They just got smoked 5-1 by the Rangers in that Winter Classic, lost a top-pairing defender to an upper body issue in the same game, then had to pack up and head on the road, and that is exactly the sort of stretch where a champion either reminds everyone why they have rings or starts to look like a nostalgia act. Across the ice, Toronto feels like a familiar story with the volume turned up, a 19-15-7 team that looks electric at home with a 14-5-5 record, feeding off that Scotiabank buzz while trying very hard not to let everyone see how thin things are on the back end, especially after losing yet another regular on the blue line in the last couple of days. They already went into Sunrise and walked out with a 4-1 win earlier this season, so from their side, this is not just another game, it is "we can do that again" energy, but it comes with a fan base on edge, an ever-growing injury board, and a coaching staff trying to deliver results right now in a division where the standard has been set by the same team they are hosting. From a betting angle, the price on this feels almost modest. The market is treating Florida as a small road favorite around that -125 zone, which is basically like saying yes, they are better, but not by much. Despite the stronger points percentage, the recent Cup history, and a very human need to answer back after getting embarrassed on a big stage, while Toronto is trying to patch together a defense and lean on home ice, noise, and star power to outscore the mess behind them. If you think the gap between a group that has already climbed the mountain twice and a team still trying to figure out what version of itself shows up each night is bigger than a coin flip, then this number feels less like a trap and more like the board daring you to trust the team with scars instead of the one with mood swings. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida Panthers money line is our full game side pick. The books are hanging a projected total in that 5.5 to 6 neighborhood depending on where you shop, which is exactly the kind of middle ground you land on when you blend two teams that both score and concede at a healthy clip. Florida's season profile has them hovering a little over 3 goals scored and a little over 3 allowed per night. Toronto lives in roughly the same neighborhood on both sides of the ledger, and when you mash those tendencies together, you land in the 6+ goal zone that the spreadsheets keep flashing. Between them, their game logs have already produced a long list of nights where the scoreboard looks more like a pinball machine, with a big chunk of Panthers games and an even bigger slice of Leafs games finishing with more than 6 on the board, and you can feel that trend in the way these teams play when things loosen up. Stylistically, Toronto is built like a fireworks show, a top six that wants to trade chances, and a defensive group that has been held together with line juggling and bandages, while Florida used to be all about tight, suffocating control, but has been dragged into something a bit more chaotic this season by all the missing bodies on the back end and the emotional hangover of that 5-1 outdoor punch in the face. Layer on the human stuff that never fits neatly into a model, a proud room in visiting white still chewing on that Winter Classic embarrassment, a home team under pressure that tends to open the throttle rather than slam the brakes when a game gets weird, and the bright lights of a national stage where nobody really wants to watch a sleepy 2-1 rock fight. When the total is basically asking, do these two manage one extra goal on top of what their averages already suggest? And both sides have been trending toward we can score, but we will give you chances too. Over recent weeks, it feels a lot more comfortable to be cheering for red lights than praying for shot blocks and frozen neutral zone traps in the final 10 minutes. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. New Jersey Devils versus New York Islanders. If you look at this matchup without any logo loyalty, the market is basically nudging people toward the roadside, while the home crowd sits there wondering why their team is the one with the plus sign next to its name. The listing has New Jersey laying a small price, and the Islanders sitting as that slightly uncomfortable home underdog, even though they come in with the better record at 23-15-4, compared with the Devils at 22-18-2. And they already handled New Jersey in this same building in that tight 2-1 win on December 24th. It feels a little like the classic, trust the model or trust your eyes spot, because the Devils carry the reputation of a team that should be more dangerous than their results show, while the Islanders have crept up the standings with a style that is not exactly poster-worthy but keeps paying the bills. New Jersey's story this season has been weirdly familiar, and not in a comforting way. They generate enough puck possession and shot volume to convince every analytical chart on the internet that good times are coming. They sit around the high 20s in shots per night, but they sit at 2.64 goals per game, down near the bottom of the league scoring tables, and it feels like every missed backdoor tap-in gets its own angry thread on social media. They just beat Utah 4-1, which is the kind of result that lets everyone breathe a little and talk about turning the page. But it sits right next to that 4-0 shutout loss to Toronto that highlighted how fragile their finishing still looks when the bounces tilt the wrong way. So you have a team that can absolutely control chunks of a game, can string together clean breakouts, can look the part for long stretches, but often skates off with a scoreboard that does not quite match the underlying effort, and bettors know that feeling all too well. The Islanders, on the other hand, are the definition of orderly chaos in the standings, which is funny because their actual style is closer to controlled suffocation than fire wagon hockey. They sit perfectly balanced with 116 goals for and 116 against, a tidy 2.76 scored and 2.76 allowed per night, which is why it makes so much sense that their whole season feels like a coin constantly spinning on its edge. Offensively, they rank down in the mid-20s by goals per game, so nobody is confusing them with a track team. But defensively, they live in that top tier, a true top 10 group by goals against that has made life pretty miserable for plenty of high-skill opponents who arrive expecting space and discover a wall instead. They were absolutely blasted 7-2 at home by Utah, and that kind of loss leaves a scar, but they bounced back with that gritty 4-3 overtime win over Toronto. And if you have watched enough hockey in New York, you know how quickly a fan base can swing from booing to roaring once the first good thing happens on home ice. The interesting wrinkle is that this coin flip team actually has a pretty clear path when you zoom out a bit. They keep games in their preferred lane, something like 28 shots for and around the same against. They lean on that defensive structure that has them in the upper tier of the league, and they trust that their building and their goaltending can carry the weight in tight third periods. Add in the rivalry juice, the recent memory of that Christmas week win over this same Devils group in this same ring, the last change for the coaching staff, and the simple fact that the team with the stronger defensive profile and the better record is the one catching the plus money, and you can see why a lot of people will quietly circle the home side even if the betting screen is pushing them toward the road favorite. As our first pick for this matchup, the New York Islanders money line is our full game side pick. Odds makers pinned this total at 5.5, which is a pretty modest number by modern NHL standards, and it fits perfectly with how both of these teams have been living this season, stuck in that awkward middle ground where chances exist but highlight reel finishes do not always follow. The Devils sit at 2.64 goals per game, the Islanders at 2.76, so if you smoosh those together you basically land in that 5.5 to 6 goal pocket that bookmakers love. And it is no surprise they chose the lower of those marks given the way both offenses like to flirt with frustration. If you only glance at recent results, your first instinct is probably to lean under, and honestly that reaction makes sense. New Jersey comes off that 4-0 shutout loss to Toronto, which was another chapter in their ongoing saga of how did we not score more with that many looks, and local coverage has been talking for weeks about their 5-on-5 shooting luck lagging behind their chance quality. The Islanders have their own brand of misery here because not long before that 7-2 beating from Utah, they went through a stretch where they found the net just 17 times across 9 games. That is under 2 goals a night, and you could hear the tension in post-game pressers as players and coaches tried to explain why everything felt so tight offensively. When both fan bases have spent so much time grumbling about goals, a total under 6 with 2 met scoring teams seems almost too neat. Here is the thing, though, the number may look low, but the way these two play gives this total some very real volatility. Both teams generally live in that 28 to 30 shots for and against range, which means you are often getting 60-plus pucks on net across the night, and anyone who has sweated a total knows that volume plus a funny bounce or two can change everything in about 3 minutes. Special teams also add a little spice here because the Islanders sit around the low teens in power play efficiency and top 10 on the kill, while the Devils are middle of the pack on the power play and way down in the mid-20s on the penalty kill. So any stretch with back-to-back minors can flip the rhythm from a sleepy chess match into a short, frantic scoring race. You do not even need both teams to be clinical, you just need one side to hit on a couple of those chances while the other chips in enough to keep the door open. On top of that, you have the regression cloud hanging over this matchup, especially for New Jersey. Their 5-on-5 finishing has lagged behind their expected numbers for much of the season, and plenty of people watching them every night have pointed to that Utah game as the kind of performance that might finally nudge their confidence back in the right direction. The Islanders, meanwhile, are coming out of a publicly embarrassing blowout and then a wild, emotional overtime win against Toronto, the sort of 1-2 punch that often nudges a team toward a looser, more open style than the coaching staff might technically prefer. In a rivalry game, early momentum can push both benches into trading chances instead of shutting things down, and once the first odd bounce or rebound finds the back of the net, everyone in the building feels that shift where a tight defensive script gives way to something a bit more up and down. With this specific matchup, this particular number, and the recent form and psychology of both benches, it is not hard to imagine a third period where a 3-2 scoreline suddenly feels less like a finished product and more like a starting point for chaos. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Boston Bruins versus Seattle Kraken. When you strip the logos off the front of the sweaters and just look at how these two are playing right now, this matchup feels a lot more balanced than the casual fan might think. Boston still carries that big, historic aura, but underneath that they are sitting on a record in the low 20s in wins, high teens in losses, and a couple of overtime results, something like 22 to 18-2, which is solid but not terrifying on its own. On the road, they have been almost perfectly human, basically a coin flip with about as many away wins as away losses, which is not exactly the resume of a team that strolls into one of the loudest buildings in the league and steamrolls everyone on a weeknight. The funny part is that people still react emotionally to the jersey, that old original 6 weight, and that often shows up in how the number is priced. A little extra respect baked in simply because the crest feels familiar and heavy. On the blue line, Boston is juggling more than they would like, and you can almost feel it when you watch them change pairs. Hampus Lindholm is sitting out with an injury that is clearly more than a short tweak, and when a veteran who eats minutes and wears a letter disappears from the rotation, it forces everyone else into slightly bigger shoes, whether they are ready or not. That means defensemen like Charlie McAvoy and the rest of that group have to shoulder more responsibility, while players such as Henry Jokiharju and Tanner Jeannot are hovering in that could be back, could be out space that coaching staffs love and hate at the same time, because it complicates game planning and line matching in real time. You end up with a unit that is still good, still talented, but not quite settled, which can matter a lot on the last game of a long trip when legs are heavy and decisions get sloppy for a shift or two at a time. Seattle comes in with a record that sounds less glamorous at first glance, something like 18 to 14 to 7, but that overtime column tells you they live in one-goal games and coin toss finishes. Recently, they have been playing the kind of hockey that makes coaches smile and bettors raise an eyebrow, stacking up points with a long streak of games where they either win or at least grab something in extra time. That 5-1 win over Calgary with Philip Grubauer turning away a mountain of shots is a good snapshot, not just because of the scoreline, but because of the pattern. Bend a little, trust the goalie, then squeeze the life out of the game once they grab the lead. The home crowd in Seattle adds another layer. The building gets loud. It feels almost like a playoff crowd even in January. And that matters for a group that leans on structure and energy rather than pure star power. Of course, it is not all sunshine for the Kraken either, and that is where the spot gets interesting. They are playing on short rest, coming off that emotional win, and this is part of a busy stretch with games stacked close together, which usually shows up in the small details, like slower back checks or tired legs on longer shifts. They are still missing Jaden Schwartz, who is stuck on injured reserve with a lower body issue, and Max McCormick is out for the entire season, which quietly chips away at their depth options and special teams combinations. Even so, the core names people care about here, Matty Beniers, Jordan Eberle, Ely Tolvan, Vince Dunn, Adam Larson, Joey Daccord, and Grubauer are on the active roster and available, which keeps the system intact, even if a few pieces around the edges are taped together. So you have this neat little contrast, a road favorite carrying history but some defensive uncertainty and travel miles, walking into a building where the home team is playing confident, structured hockey, feeding off a crowd that loves a scrap and a close finish, and where the recent form suggests they are more dangerous than their longer-term numbers might imply. As our first pick for this matchup, the Seattle Kraken money line is our full game side pick. The total number hanging around this matchup sits in that classic neighborhood, roughly around 6 goals, which is the sportsbook way of saying we think there will be offense, but we are not expecting total madness. On the surface, with 2 capable attacks and some recognizable names, it is easy to lean toward a more free-flowing script, but the context suggests something a little more controlled lurking underneath. Seattle's season-long profile gives away a lot once you think about it for a moment. They have just over 100 goals scored and north of 100 allowed, which tells you they are not routinely winning 6-4 track meets. They are grinding out 3-2, 4-3 type results where one bounce or one rebound decides the night. That recent stretch of games fits the same pattern, strong goaltending, like Grubauer's 40-plus save night in Calgary, solid structure in front, and then a late push when they smell blood. It is not that they cannot score, it is that they would rather make you work for every decent chance, and that kind of mindset tends to sit under the total more often than not, especially when they are nursing injuries and leaning heavily on their defensive core and their netminders. Boston, funny enough, has a bit of a split personality in their numbers, and that tension shows up when you try to read the total. They have scored into the 130s in goals for and allowed into the 130s in goals against, which screams volatility, and if you only checked box scores, you might think every game is a roller coaster. But context matters here too. On the road, especially late in a trip, most veteran teams talk about simplifying the game. Shorter shifts, safer plays at the blue lines, fewer risky pinches from the defense, and that sort of coaching mantra tends to drag pace down, even if the talent on the ice could support higher scoring fireworks. The loss of Lindholm does not just hurt their defending, it often nudges a coach toward a more cautious script because you simply do not have the same margin for error when your most trusted all-situation defender is in a suit instead of skates. Then there is the schedule wrinkle that quietly ties both sides of this total discussion together. Seattle is playing its 4th game in about 6 days, with travel, and while the adrenaline can carry you for stretches, fatigue usually shows up in pace, not just in mistakes. Tired teams tend to get the puck deep, get off the ice, and play a simpler north-south style, which paradoxically can lower total shot volume and keep games in that 1-3 probably wins range, even if the teams involved are not natural defensive dynamos. Boston, by contrast, comes in more rested, finishing off a road swing, and that often leads to a more professional, business-like effort, focused on getting out of town with 2 points rather than putting on a show for neutral fans on ESPN highlights. Put all of that together, the grinding Seattle style, the travel and fatigue on their side, The defensive injuries and likely conservative tone from Boston, and the number sitting in that 6-goal window starts to look less like a green light for a shootout and more like a test of patience for both teams and for anyone holding a ticket on the total. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.